One.
One for 4 o'clock?
No, he's here. We're about to have a council meeting.
We need some math.
Regina's, oh, there we go.
Afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon, Fred.
Ready to go, Regina?
Yes, sir.
Everybody okay? Couple of minutes past. The special virtual meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Thursday, May 21st, 2020 will be called to order at a couple of minutes past 3. At this time, would everyone willing and able join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley,
Here.
Alderwoman Tierney,
Here.
Alderman Payon,
Here.
Alderwoman Pendell Charles, Alderman Finlayson,
Present.
Alderman Rodriguez, Alderman Gay, Alderman Savage,
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
You, Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The first item on the agenda is business and miscellaneous, beginning with ID 2720, proposed executive session of the City Council in accordance with Maryland General Code, General Provisions Article 3305, which is a closed session to discuss a personnel matter with council.
So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to move pursuant to Annotated Code of Maryland, General Provision Article 3-305, B 1, 7, 8, and 9 to go into closed session. Can I get a motion?
So
Move to second.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley,
Yes.
Alderwoman Tierney,
Here.
Alderman Payon,
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson,
Aye.
Alderman Alderman Savage,
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
No.
And Alderman Gay is here.
Okay, and Alderman Gay.
Aye.
Okay.
Motion passes. Thank you. Can we please turn the public cameras off? Your meeting. Can we turn the cameras on, please? Give me the thumbs up when they are good. Good. Okay. Mr. City Attorney, please present the
hold
next
on.
item on the
They
agenda.
need to adjourn the special meeting.
No?
You need to adjourn the special meeting also.
Okay, sorry.
Just a motion to adjourn.
Need a motion to adjourn the special meeting?
So moved.
Thought we did that.
Second.
You need to do a roll call, Regina, on that?
No, it's fine. All in favor.
Okay. All those say aye and raise their hand. Aye. Okay.
Okay,
Back
Mr.
on camera? Yes?
You're back in open meeting now.
Okay, the open meeting is on.
Gavin, you're in the center square.
Oh, hold on a second. Don't take it too long.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, the next item on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, is a discussion on the FY21 budget and the
We not in-
COVID-19.
Hold. Everybody, hold on. At this point, everybody has to log off and log back on so we can set Granicus up for your work session.
Oh, okay, bye.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye.
In a second.
And there's a different password. Look at your calendar. Thank you.
Yeah. Saw that.
Whew.
So when you told them to,
They have to log out two things.
no, but when you told them to, in the special meeting, they had adjourned the meeting.
How can I get it? I can't get over this. I tried. Oh, you're proof. Yay.
You did great.
Okay, I was gonna say, I thought I did.
There we go.
Okay, let's open Live Manager.
Wow, struggling. Okay.
So what happened this time?
All right, so you ready to go?
She's here. I'm out of here. Is it still here?
Maybe.
Stop.
All
Finalize.
right, so work session,
Yeah.
start.
Okay, okay, let's see. Now we need to go back in and open the meetings up again.
Back to it. Yeah, there you go. And you got some.
Yeah.
Hello, strangers. Everybody having a good week?
How you doing? Been a long time.
Hey, Gavin, are you just going to ride by in a car on this thing?
Yeah, I've got a Ward 1 thing at 6.
Me too.
So I've got to just drive by, say congratulations, and then ride.
Oh,
Yeah.
for something
What do you
else.
do? Honk your horn, kind of stop in front of the house, wave?
I haven't been given a lot of detail
Yeah,
yet.
it's at 6 at we're meeting in the parking lot of what's the school? J. Alberts or something down there?
Yeah, Adams
Yeah,
Park.
we meet there.
So
Okay.
what's the group? Who's this for?
Harold Lloyd III.
He graduated today.
It's Chucky's son,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
By the way, Dewan, 8 a.m. until 11 a.m. on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
All
Is
right.
everybody on? We should talk about it now to see if we can get everybody to take a time
Okay.
slot or something.
Yeah. Is everybody is a council here?
Wait a minute.
We have to open the meeting, don't we?
Not sure we got everybody on yet.
I'm not sure I know what you mean, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. I don't have that on my calendar.
This is for something we're trying to propose to you, but we're trying to see if everybody's on.
Okay.
We have some technical issues we're trying to solve, and we'll be right with you.
Sheila, 8 a.m.
Well, you know that doesn't make me happy.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's for the kids. It's for the kids.
Fred, that's
All
your
right,
time for audit.
I did 7 o'clock.
Hey,
for the
Carrie.
kids. I guess I could do 8 o'clock.
I didn't see you. You were on the second screen, I guess.
No, I haven't been there yet.
Actually, Monday's
Hey, Lynn.
Memorial Day.
No, I did for a year. I went to greet the kids every Wednesday morning at 7 o'clock.
Oh, you
I
did?
did. Yes,
That
you
was
did.
before my first knee surgery.
I was in high school when I used to be one of the kids that would walk by like, hey.
Oh, really? Were you there?
Hey,
See,
that little kid that was spitting on everybody, I think we got who it was.
I would have yanked him. I would have yanked him if he did something bad.
Sheila was a trooper though. She'd be out there in the rain with her yellow coat.
That's right.
Yeah.
In the snow.
I was good though, and all kinds of people joined me. People driving into DC would stop and hang out with me for a half hour, and firefighters were there, and everybody, police officers.
I never saw so many
When-
buses in my life.
We ready, Takia?
We don't have Rhonda back on.
Quick. Let's close down Ward 3.
It's terrible.
I'm only kidding.
There's a whole, all the department heads are supposed to be on now too.
Mhm. Hey, Rhonda.
I don't know where I am, but I think I'm between naps and homework.
You're in Kansas.
I must be.
Click your heels 3 times.
Gosh. Wait a minute, I know. Okay.
I think we got everybody. You'll let me know, Takia?
Oh. You can't get in.
Who's that?
You want to see yourself? Come here. One time. You can come see yourself one time. On the TV.
Must be talking to your husband.
No, oh, it's my grandson. He just got up from his nap, which was too short. Oh, gosh. Woo. Okay, thank you.
Sorry all it's taken this long.
We are still
Sure it'll be a
live.
speedy presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Ross talking, really?
Can you guys hear me? We are still live.
I bet the unions timed Ross. We should ask them, Fred.
Yes.
Now.
Kerry, have you been to Disney? Because you've got that cute Minnie Mouse scarf on there. Just wondering. I didn't know they'd opened yet.
It's been a while. I wish.
Saw the videos, thank you for the ratings, and I think love all of the community, personality, and all the social. It's really helping me
I'm sending you guys a picture of Obama's official portrait, since the person who lives in the White House is not doing an official unveiling. So they're unveiling it across the country electronically.
Wow.
Did you frame
Thank you,
Fred's
Sheila.
copy? Did you frame Fred's copy?
I'm sending Fred a copy too. Even Fred can appreciate it.
I put this on his desk, Gavin. just to remind him. My hero.
Did he send you Mitch McConnell?
Oh God, that would be bad.
No, but I did send her a portrait of Howdy
Are
Doody.
we on TV? Are we on TV?
Sort of. I feel like we're in the progressive commercial. I think we have done incredibly well in the virtual world so far. A few hiccups here and there, but I think the team's done a great job. Want to thank them. But if you could hurry up, that'd be good.
Is everybody on? Dewan, you can talk to him about the high school. I'm trying to send this text.
Oh, yeah. If you guys are free, what day is it, Sheila? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Right.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the high school are handing out caps and gowns for graduation. And so Sheila called yesterday and came with the idea of getting us along with community members at the school to those days from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., you know, with signs and stuff, just encouraging the graduates as they come and collect their cap and gown. So if we could get a collective day for all of us to go, that'd be great.
I'd love to, even though they don't know who we are.
Well, we can put it on our signs.
Y'all be on Instagram.
Congratulations from City Council.
They know you, Dewan.
Well, but no, they know you guys from when I put you on Instagram.
Thank you.
Gavin, maybe we can get out of our meeting at Ward 1.
I'm confused. Are we or what? What's going on right now?
I have no idea.
People, can they hear us?
I have no idea.
It's still having technical difficulties. Takia's going to tell us when we're good to go. I apologize. Oh.
Okay, I move that we adjourn. Just kidding, everybody.
Second.
Second.
Fred, you're gonna ruin your teeth.
At least you recognize it was ice this time.
As opposed to crack?
No, I'm cracking ice.
That's stress.
Okay.
Wave.
Who became both a vice president and president of the United States without ever being elected to either office? Just want to take a guess, anybody?
One of the Adams.
Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford.
Oh, yes. Very good. Very good.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the first female prime minister of a European country?
Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's one for
I
Ward
don't know
4.
what year.
Which U.S. president issued the Emancipation Proclamation?
Abraham Lincoln.
There you go.
And are we happy for that?
Okay,
Some of us would not be sitting here.
Okay, this is a double square. Double square.
Who was vice president of the United States when Lincoln was assassinated?
Johnson, Andrew Johnson.
Yes, y'all are good. Who is the oldest?
That's because we're old.
Ed was there.
He said president.
Oh, God.
Who is the oldest person to be elected to the office of president of the United States?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
No.
No. Who was it?
Ronald.
Ozo.
That was right.
Really? Wow, that was a trick question. let's remind him of that.
Who was the first Roman Catholic? Oh, this is easy. Roman Catholic to be vice president of the United States of America.
Vice president.
John Kennedy?
He was president.
You're right, Ross. Joe Biden.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Who was the first lady to be elected to public office?
Hillary, right?
Yeah.
Way before Hillary.
No, it's. What are we doing? Okay.
Good.
Julian? All good?
Yes, we're ready now.
Okay.
Amen.
Just going to do that for effects. The special virtual meeting of the Annapolis City Council on Thursday, May 21, 2020 will be called to order at about 4:30. So we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to call, should I call the roll, Takira, or not?
No, not for
Okay, don't
work
need to
session.
call the roll. We've done the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. City Attorney, please present the item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda, today is a discussion on the FY21 budget and COVID-19.
Jody and David. Jody on, Dave?
Yeah, Alderman Arnett, are you going to lead the discussion, or do you want us to kick it off?
Well, I'd be happy to start, and I want to start by asking the council's pleasure. We sent you a 25-page PowerPoint earlier today, and there's been a couple of tweaks to that since then, and we can go through that, but I would suggest we might not have time. One of the things that we could do is to drop to the very end of the PowerPoint given the length of discussion we had in the earlier meeting, and go right to the last 3 pages, one of which you don't have, unfortunately, and get to the heart of the budget discussion. But otherwise, we can go through what we'd prepared, which was to essentially walk you through the Finance Committee report.
I'd say last 3 pages are okay. Alderman Savage had his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I think having read through your report, I think there are a few major big issues that you may want to raise, that you have raised from the Finance Committee, that I think we should talk about more. But, leave that up to you.
Right. Well, so
May I ask?
Alderman Finlayson.
Could we ask Julian to put those 3 pages up, one at a time, of course?
Please, Julian.
It starts with other Finance Committee matters.
So it's the last 3 pages.
Right.
Well, Alderman Arnett, are you going to talk a bit about, I did find your explanation in the report helpful when you're talking about the revenues and expenditures. That was really a simple chart that helped for me. I don't know if that's going to be part of your conversation.
Well, it was to be, but that's going back to the beginning of the report, basically back to page 6. Maybe we can flip back to that, Rob, when we get in. I think when we get into these 2 pages, it'll take us back to that. These 3 pages. Actually, really only 2 pages. I'm looking for direction as to how we want to proceed.
So I would say go to the summary. Are we on the page you'd like, Alderman Arnett?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So we had quite a bit of discussion throughout the Finance Committee meetings with the administration and those members of the council that joined us about what, if anything, should be done this year to address possible impacts on the fiscal year budget due to the pandemic. And we basically tried to figure out what, if anything, we could do to quantify what the size of those impacts would be, and we could not. And instead, the city manager offered to us that we get frequent updates throughout the fiscal year to give us alerts if there are problems appearing, which seemed like a reasonable thing to do. We also discussed what we should be doing prophylactically to potentially address impacts on out-year budgets. And the committee's conclusion was to pass that on to the council. If we go to the next page, we start to get into some of the meat of the issues that the council talked about. The first one is sort of minor, but the Finance Committee felt that the budget should be organized to reflect the current city organization with an Office of Environmental Policy existing. We, the Finance Committee, punted that to the council. The next issues are what really, I think, are things that we could take some time to talk about today. And we had some discussion of this in closed session. There's a technical issue for me, and there's a variance between Finance Committee members, but we do not have anything formally agreeing to deferring the COLA payment. And we have gotten something recently from the Office of Law about our ability to not make the city contribution to the 401A plans. Those were 2 issues that kept the Finance Committee from coming to a consensus on the ordinance section 1, which is the biggest single section of the ordinance. If you remember, that's the section that does the appropriations by department and there's an Appendix A that shows that in detail. And so I think at this point there is a question to the council about how do we bring the budget into balance? And we're at this point short by $689,000, which would be the savings. And
We just heard from Jody.
Pardon me?
Didn't we just hear from Jody that 274,000?
Sheila.
Okay.
That was in closed session. I'm setting the stage for needing to find $689,000 that would have been the savings for the COLAs and $160,000 that can still be potentially the savings from the 401A. So I think you're right. Now is the lead in to Jody to talk about money that we could find for the 689.
Sorry. Well, you can sit here and I'll get it. Oh, whoops.
You're not on, yeah. So Jody, we were just talking in the previous session about finding money because from a transfer, and we were also talking about finding money by increasing the amount of allowance. What's the term of art?
Turnover allowance.
Yeah, the turnover allowance. So the question is, do we have ways to bring the budget into balance, finding alternative cuts to those recommended by the city manager?
Mr. Chairman, would you like Jody to go through those things?
Yes, that's what I was.
Well, so there are other, if the COLA deferral doesn't occur, then there are other options to approach it from a personnel standpoint. One option is to increase the turnover allowance, which in effect forces departments to hold more vacancies open for longer. We already had a substantial turnover allowance in the budget. And if you go that option, it's another substantial turnover allocation. So more vacancies open longer, and for a good part of the year, many vacancies will be held open. And that will be controlled on a department by department basis, not allowing them to fill open positions.
And?
Trying to get mute off, but that's already at $572,890. I think we're trying to find an additional at least $400,000, something more in that turnover. And my question is,
correct.
Do we really have the room to do that?
We do, except for what it results in is very few vacancies being able to be filled during the year.
So that would mean the vacancy
turns around and the results are better than we anticipated, which I don't anticipate right now. So it's going to be more vacancies for much longer throughout the year.
So we have vacancy currently for Director of Public Works. We have a vacancy for Director of, something planning in P&Z. We have other vacancies. We will most certainly likely have police vacancies during the year, fire vacancies during the year. And what you're saying is
some of what you're talking about, they're in the interviewing stages. So I can't speak to which specific vacancies will be there when the final action is taken. It's going to be tough, and it'll be based on the vacancies at the time the budget is passed.
Alderman Arnett, can you go back to that figure that you presented? What is that again? The 500,000? Is that vacancies?
In the proposal, the summary of proposed reductions to the general fund that we have in our budget Well, we got from the city manager, I have it in my budget binder. It says.
Okay, yeah, okay, I
2%
got you.
personnel turnover allowance of 572,890.
Okay,
Now
and
we're
that's,
talking about increasing that to much closer to $1 million. And what the finance director said is those vacancies that aren't filled will stay open longer. My question is, as suggested by you, Ellie, what is the value of the vacancies we have now? How many tens of thousands of dollars of vacancies do we have currently, and are we freezing those in place right now? Because we have to add whatever the difference is between the 680 and the transportation money of whatever it was 240,000. We're going to have to add that into this line of proposed cuts.
You have that, Jody?
Well, we have a list of current vacancies, but like I said, you talked about one position, the director of public works, and that's they're on their interviews right now. So that one is very soon going to be filled. I mean, there are a few other vacancies, about the same number as when we spoke during the finance committee meeting. So yes, you can get that amount out of vacancies. It's just gonna hurt in that departments are going to be holding a lot of vacancies open for a long time.
Well,
so
you're asking the council to sort of shoot blind. There's about $450,000 more of vacancies that we won't be able to fill. We don't know where those are. I think Sally's position, they found someone and offered, so that position is filled in planning and zoning.
Correct.
Mr. Chair, did you confirm
450,000 in fire or in police? I'm not sure that's palatable. If it's sprinkled around generally across all departments.
It's not a general sprinkling. It's an allocation based on vacancies that are currently there, and the amount based on the positions that are there. And I provided a listing near the end of the finance committee meetings. It's altered slightly, but I just got the list yesterday and I quickly went through it, so I don't have anything prepared for you now.
So can David and can we please get that to the council, Jody, David, so they have something to work from, please, when you can.
Yeah, and we can get that, but remember that we're still negotiating on the COLA. So I think any way we go down that path right now is not going to be productive. We're still negotiating with the unions on the COLA.
Mr. Mayor, but I understand that there's. Thank you. I know I can't see the screen. I think
it's a little harder now. Sorry.
I know. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt like that. Isn't there legislation pending on a hiring freeze, which will require a fiscal analysis? I mean, that would have to. That number has to be solidified somehow. Am I wrong about the legislation? I thought there was a hiring freeze legislation.
Asked that be put in for first reader on Tuesday night.
Okay, so is there a fiscal analysis applied to it?
Well, sort of.
Okay, well, that value would be good to know to compare to this, because it's one or the other.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Savage.
Yes, I feel like we're kind of.
Alderman Finlayson next.
Getting into the.
I was next.
Okay, sorry, Duane, I can't.
We're kind of getting into the weeds here, and maybe this is a consequence of us jumping at the end of the presentation, but there are some basic things that I think we need to know. First of all, can somebody just review the budget timeline in terms of when is this going to come back to us for a vote? There are some things I want to try to make sure we avoid in terms of last year. We had the vote pretty late in the month and we had no chance to come back. I mean, what if we vote no on this? Are we going to have time to figure out another way forward?
We'll have
to. Well, that's what I'm saying. We need to factor that in here with the schedule. But also, I think it'd be worthwhile to go back and go over some of the basics of the revenue and expenditures to show the structural deficit, which underlies many of these concerns and is related to some of those COVID impacts and projections. So that's just kind of what I'm thinking is we need to back up a little bit.
So as I understand it, we're scheduled to meet on June 10th at 10 o'clock in the morning and spend that day until we strike a final vote on a final balanced budget. One would hope that we will do that, and we will be able to do that before 3 o'clock in the morning. But one of the intents of this meeting was so that we didn't have to get everybody caught up to speed on the work that the Finance Committee had done, and that's why that fairly elaborate PowerPoint was to run through, build the case, go into all of the votes that we took and the deliberations we had on the ordinance, the two pieces of the two resolutions on fees and fines, the community grants, and so forth. And I don't know where other council members find themselves in terms of being up to speed. And all of that is in the context of the mayor's budget. It doesn't speak to any directions that members might want to go to in terms of finding ways to increase revenues or finding ways to decrease spending for whatever reason. It's just using the mayor's budget as the base from where we're taking off. And I would say, from my sense of the Finance Committee, other than Section 1 of Ordinance 1620, the Finance Committee was basically accepting the mayor's budget and all of the different proposals in there as an acceptable budget.
Ross, I have June the 8th, 10 o'clock. No,
you're right.
Yes,
You're right.
this
You're
is
right.
Takia. I wanted to correct that date. It's June the 8th.
But I'm not coming till the 10th.
Okay.
Alderman Gay?
Yeah, I had a quick question in regards to what we were talking about previously, the hiring freezes, and then also what's on the screen that says to balance the budget, a pay reduction of some sort is being requested of employees. So first, I thought that when we talked about the freezes during the Finance Committee meeting, Tricia mentioned that it would be difficult then to put that responsibility, additional responsibility on other employees throughout the entire process. So would she be able to speak to where we stand with that and, how that may impact, just normal government operations, putting additional work on other people?
Thanks, Trish.
And I also have a follow-up when she's done.
Well, obviously with doing further reductions or delays in filling vacancies, it doesn't really speak to whether you're creating overtime assignments or overtime costs by just, having to have that performed by other employees who are non-exempt from the FLSA or are subject to overtime provisions of their bargaining unit agreements. So we would still be responsible for that kind of impact as well. You do have to spread staff thinner, and you may not have the professional or technical expertise that would have been satisfied with filling the vacancy. And timing is everything. So those vacancies that we're attempting to fill may in fact be relatively critical positions that we were trying to move forward and fill to fulfill some important city business that has been on hold as a result of that. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any follow-up to that, I'd be happy to try.
I appreciate that very much. And then my second question in regards to what's on the screen, what sort of reduction would be requested or is being recommended by the committee? I do remember at some point, I think you guys were taking up a consideration for legislation that would, I think, was a 5% pay cut for employees who make over $100,000 in the city, I think. But that was voted down. So where do you stand on pay reductions, and who would you necessarily be requesting them from?
So Jody gave us a number. If that it was, the proposal was anyone who in the city who earned over $100,000 and was not in the bargaining unit would get a pay cut of 5%. That only came out to, if I recall it correctly, Jody, about $68,000, or basically 1/10 of the amount of money we were looking at for the deferral COLAs. So it, first of all, was viewed as unfair by the committee, and committee members, correct me if I'm mischaracterizing, unfair to focus it on that set of workers, and also ineffective in terms of coming anywhere close to finding the amount of money we were looking for.
So, I mean, if it's on the screen and at some point we may have to make that recommendation, I just think that maybe then it should be more than a 5%. Again, I'll point to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who took a 20% pay cut voluntarily. But I don't think that it should be the employees at the bottom, and I'll keep saying that until we take some sort of vote on it, or until it's brought before us again.
I guess I would suggest to you that this conversation is moot unless you want additional savings. If in fact we find we don't do the $240,000 transfer from transit because we now don't have to, and we do increase the amount of the allowance for vacancies to hold those jobs open longer, and we are going to continue to not make the $160,000 contribution to the 401A plans.
May I offer a point of clarification about your proposal, Alderman Gay? We do have bargaining unit members that are making in excess of 100,000. So you really, in assessing that effort, we need to look at pay compression. We need to really examine which employees that would realistically be associated with. And I would suggest that we're taking more data into play here than just choosing that amount of money.
Well, what would be the difference in, or what has, if you could speak to the difference in past cuts when they've done to employees who make less? What would be that argument was brought up previously and when we did the finance committee meeting, saying that they had negotiated to those numbers and that there were expectations set and all of these things. And I feel that the employees who do other jobs are the same way. They've negotiated for those numbers. They expect a certain amount of pay as well. So, what Ross has just said is that we may not get to that point, but I'm saying it was on the screen, so I had to bring it.
That was part of my argument, Dewan, and at Finance Committee, exactly what you just said. It sends a message that it's not the little guys we're after. I mean, we're not after anybody, but you know, the big guys have to take it with the little guys when things get tough. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that is definitely the message.
But I don't see any cuts in any of anyone's salary here if we can avoid it during this time.
I agree. I totally agree.
Everybody has shown up and executed their jobs excellently. There wasn't one, you know, we had some thought that maybe some people won't even show up just out of fear in that, and that wasn't the case. Everybody stepped up. So that's kind of where we are now. I think it was Alderman Savage, Alderman, was it Sheila Finlay said next, who was, I can see Rhonda.
Yes, I did have my hand up. Thank you. Just for clarification again, Jody, the transit fund transfer is 174 or 274?
Hold on. There. Sorry. 240,800. And
so,
yeah.
So that amount could be used towards the shortfall of 698.
680.
Correct. 689. Yes.
That is an option. Remember that amount that's coming from was going to the transit funds coming out of budget stabilization fund. So it is a part of the $470,000 structural deficit that we have embedded into our proposal. So if you use it for something else, it's going to be a part of a structural deficit still. You're using it for salaries, which is a continuing expense. And we knew that going into it, using it for transit, but we had to make a balanced transit budget. But that is a use for this now. We can put it to this other purpose, but it is a part of that structural deficit. Now, if you do that, and you can, the difference between that and the 689 is what you could put into your turnover allowance.
And
it significantly impacts any vacancies that we have that could not be filled.
I thought you said all along and during the finance committee meetings that we did not have a structural deficit, but that if we use the 2 million in rainy day fund, we would then create a structural deficit. So I'm hearing something different now.
No. The only structural at any time we use fund balance sources to cover continuing expenses, we are creating a structural deficit for the following fiscal year. So we did not say there was no structural deficit. The budget stabilization fund usage of $473,800 is using fund balance, a reserve for fund balance for budget stabilization that's going to pay for a transit transfer, and there was a $33,000 piece that was being used to make that final budget balance. That is the only structural deficit we've created. Now we're in a very difficult time, so those are the times when you would tap reserves like the budget stabilization fund. But the larger you make that, and if you say, well, then we've got 2 million of other monies we could use, then you have an even bigger problem in the next year. And we're trying to keep that at the lowest level possible.
Okay, so if we use that, then our structural deficit would be to the amount of $240,000.
No, there's still a piece that was used to balance when we went through our initial reductions and we did the 689 and all the other things that were on that list. There was a difference of $233,000. That $233,000 plus the amount that we were sending to the transit fund to help it balance totals the $473,800.
Okay. Did you give us a dollar amount for the turnover allowances?
For the original ones?
No, today. The increase in turnover allowances, what would that be? I know there's a $500,000.
There's an original 572, and then
I calculated it as about 440 or 450. It's
right.
680 minus 240.
In addition to the 5 that's already there?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it comes close to doubling that number, which is what I'm saying, that it significantly reduces management's ability to fill in.
Okay. You provided me a list of those vacancies. And I think I heard you say you have that list, but it just needs to be updated.
Yeah, so yesterday I asked HR to pull a more recent list because it changes on a regular basis. So I wanted to have the most updated list and what the situations were on the ones that were advertised or offers made or in the interview stages, so I knew what status they were at. That helps me decide, okay, how much turnover would we put in the budget if we do this other calculation and add to the turnover? Where would I put that? which budgets do I put that in? Do I put it in, do I put it in fire? Do I put it in DPW? Do I put it in finance? You know, and based on the situations of the open positions, where it would go to.
Okay. And my last question, I thought we confirmed the new planning and zoning director, did we not?
It's it's a deputy, isn't it? The director name?
Chief of Comprehensive Planning.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the director, it's a, okay.
No, the public
Okay.
works director position is in the interviewing stage.
But that position in planning and zoning, an offer has already been made and the individual will start in June.
Okay, but I just wanted to be clear about the director of planning and zoning. Have we confirmed Dr. Nash in that position?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you. Done.
Julian, I'm going to ask you to go to full screen so I can see everyone. Alderwoman Pindell Charles and then Alderwoman Tyranny are the ones that I saw. I apologize. It's hard to see you guys. We're on different pages.
Now, I just wanted to make one comment from Alderman Gay's comment. And whenever you're talking about a percentage of reduction in salary, whether it's the upper level leadership or it's the ones at the bottom of the pay scale, we always have to remember that whoever is not there to fill those vacancies that it sounds like we're not going to be filling for a while, those are the folks, all of the folks from the top of the pay scale to the lower end of the pay scale are going to have to make up for that work. I remember vividly when I was in Baltimore City, we had an opportunity, do we take furloughs or do we let people go? And everybody was willing. I'm not recommending furloughs, but we took them because we knew if the ones who stayed around had more work to do. And that was the kind of the bottom line. But I'm not recommending furloughs. That's not on the table. But just keep in mind that the ones who stay, if there are vacancies and we can't fill them, from the top to the lower end are going to have to make up for that work.
I saw Alderwoman Tyranny was next, and then Alderman Savage, I saw his hand up.
Okay, thank you. Just two things. The first one is on my colleague Alderwoman Finlayson's discussion about the transit fund. That would be sort of a, stealing from Peter to pay Paul, because that we have a transit system in debt, and that was earmarked, not that bad word, but that money was supposed to go to transit, so a debt. And so by taking that and putting it to something else, we still have a debt in transit. So it's important to know that relationship, of the transit department. But my question is to Rob's point, because we don't have much time, could we just summarize what this would probably go to David Jarrell. We have three funds that we have to keep the percentages: the general fund balance, budget stabilization, and the additional fund balances. We have that chunk of money that we want to, just as it says, stabilize unless we desperately need to use it. Okay, so we have that. Then on the other side, we made a big assumption on what our drop in revenue was going to be for next year. So could I ask, do we feel comfortable with that? Well, number one, what is that assumption? Because I hear other cities are saying they're projecting a 40% loss in revenue. So could I ask you, what percent drop in revenue across the board did we anticipate? And number two, do we feel like we have enough in those funds in case our projections are too optimistic?
Jody? Well,
David, you just passed it off.
Yeah, well, I can talk about it, but Jody is. So let me just talk about the assumptions we made. So we assumed that there was going to be a 6-month period, basically, that we were going to be greatly impacted by COVID. So 3 of those months are in FY20. So they're the months that we're currently in: April, May, June, and then it would continue July, August, September. And then we would start getting better. So we decreased most of our general fund revenues during those 3 months. So property tax is our biggest revenue source on general fund, and that's stable. So that's not going to be impacted this year or next by the COVID. That's our concern for FY22 with the reassessment. And that's what we keep talking about, FY22 as being a difficult year. But those were the fundamental assumptions that we made, was that it was going to be about a 6-month period. Remember, we put this together back in early March, before we knew a whole lot about how this was going to play out. So that was the assumption that we made. So Jody, do you want to run through the specific numbers that we decreased the revenue by because of those assumptions?
So I can just say in general, one, as you said, the property tax is a given. It's not going to be impacted for this coming fiscal year. And to answer your first question, Alderwoman Tierney, we don't feel we will need to use that amount for transportation because in the meantime, they've got a significant federal award that's coming through Maryland Department of Transportation that they can use to cover lost revenue. So they can use it for any operating cost at all. It's not tied to COVID. So that
if we get it, right?
It will help significantly this year, next year.
We did get it?
Possibly the following year. Huh?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought we just had a resolution to apply for it.
No, that wasn't that one. I'm not sure which resolution you're referring to. This is an award that came automatically from the CARES Act.
Okay.
Going down to transportation systems throughout the nation. And this is our piece coming through the state.
Okay.
And we draw it down like we do our normal operating transit grant. So it can be used for operations, any operation cost. And so it's a significant, it was over $4 million. Our first conversation was they said we had to use 50% for capital and 50% for operating, but that's changed. They're going to allow us to use it all for operations. So it's going to help us significantly there.
Okay. I don't think the council knows much about that at all right now. And it's probably not in this budget discussion, but that's good news about transit.
So,
I'm trying to help Rick Gordon out.
Right. And so on the general fund revenues, the property taxes are consistent. Depending on which revenue source it was, we discounted it differently, but most of the tourism related revenue flows, admission and amusement taxes that come from large gatherings, the hotel motel taxes that we get, those we assumed, as he said, was 3 months this year and 3 months next year before we start to recover, and then in the fall we start to collect those again. So that's a general that can pretty much be applied to any of those revenue sources that are dependent on tourism and activities and large gatherings. So there were some that were specific, like permitting activities that we took 10 to 20% discounts on, depending on what kind of permitting activity it was. You know, the sidewalk cafe permits, that's more tourism and activity related. So that was one of those 3 months things where building permits would have been, I can't remember what it was, 10% or 20% off building permits. But there were all these individual line items that we kind of had to think about individually how they might be impacted. The general thought process was in the fall we'd be recovering. We don't know long-term impacts on income taxes, but projecting into next year, there's 15 to 20% unemployment now. So I'm doing an updated set of projections. Even I think my projections that are there are good still for next year for that. That was almost a flat 7 million. 8, I think it was, for next year. So we've discounted those. The thing we don't know is, will those people that are without jobs get jobs back quickly? How soon will income taxes climb back up? How soon will tourism come back? Will we be having Navy football games in the fall? What will graduation next year look like at the Naval Academy? We don't know all that yet. That's what could impact that assumption that things start to turn around in the fall.
Jody, what did you do about parking revenue assumption?
Parking was one of those ones that I tied to tourism activity, where we pretty much assumed that there would be no revenue for these last 3 months of the year. And that for the first 3 months of next fiscal year, there would be no revenues. And we predicted 9 months of revenue in 21.
Thank you.
Alderman Savage was next, then Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alderman Tierney, for bringing those up, because I do think their projections, I'm really worried about this. As you've said, at the time, they were quite reasonable when they were put together, but now it's a few months later and we have better information. We have from our own CDC, who is saying that it's very likely we're going to be having rebounds in the fall, which means things are not going to go back to normal. All right. We need to plan for that adequately. I think we need to realize that and update this budget, because right now it's not accurate. And I think that's going to be impacting and compounding our structural deficit, which I do want to ask the Finance Committee Chair to get into a bit more. For me, furloughs are on the table, especially if the union is not going to agree to any kind of cost of living decrease. Freeze on salaries, because, again, as I've said before, I don't understand why we're looking at ways to give our employees raises during this time when we have unprecedented unemployment. I can't be looking at my constituents and doing that. That just seems really irresponsible. We should save our budget stabilization fund for covering our basic expenses, but not for giving raises, especially when we're talking about using some of our COVID funds for giving hazard pay, which I support. They need that. They are on the front lines. But should we really be giving them hazard pay and a raise when we have so many people out of work? My wife's lost work. We have friends who've lost work. How could we be considering even doing that right now? So unless that gets resolved, for me, I can't support this budget. We need to have some amount of compromise and reasonable. The city manager and the administration led with a very reasonable budget. But now we can't even act on that because the unions are not agreeing. So can we go back for the chair, Chair of the Finance Committee, Art Ross, can you go back to that slide? Because again, that was really an eye opener for me. Slide number 6, where it shows, compares our general fund revenue to our general fund expenditures. Julian, could you put that up for a second or a minute or two? If you go to slide number 6, I think it is, and Ross, you may be able to explain this better than I, but once you yeah, this one. So when you look at so general fund revenue, the first line there, projected 80 million, proposed 82 million. You compare that to the total the general fund expenditures, and you'll see that the expenses are higher than the revenue. And even if you look at total revenue compared to total expenditures, we're off. Our expenses are higher. That is partially because of COVID, but it's also partially because we have this structural deficit for a number of years, if I'm not mistaken. I know I've heard Alderman Arnett mention that previously, but now this is worse. We can't be avoiding this because this means we have to dig into our reserves. And again, I don't think we should be digging into the reserves unless it's a matter of meeting our basic needs and basic services. But right now we're talking about digging into them for these unnecessary raises. So Alderman Arnett, do you have any more? Could you provide any more information about this
Yes, I can. And I did have my hand raised. Jody, it would be helpful to get these the projections and be able to look at the pieces of it. I think my sense of it, as you spoke about it to the Finance Committee, is you're being reasonable in trying to figure out what the impacts will be if things return to normal in the summertime. But I guess it would be it'll be unpleasant to speculate about what if CDC projections are right. And that speaks and leads right into talking about these two tables, because I think we have two different budget problems going on. One is the one that is the pandemic is presenting us with, but I think we have another longer standing problem that we have been band-aiding over, and that is we continue to have slower growth in our revenues than we do in our spending. And this table and the one on the next slide really do emphasize that. And that is something that is going to catch up with us sooner or later. We've been able to address that because we do what I term, probably not the prettiest way to say it, but I think we do pessimistic budgeting, which is we're pessimistic about the amount of revenue we're really going to get because we don't want to count particularly the grants if they don't come forward. And we're also pessimistic about the amount of money that we really are going to spend. And that's noticeable when you go to the CAFR and you look at budgeted versus actual. And when you look at even our tables in the budget binder in the very beginning, where you're showing the adjusted 2020, and you can see that our spending was at least $2 million less for the general fund than we had budgeted for. And that's been a recurring thing. And then we've been using that. It's spilled over into the different reserve funds, one of which we can use for one-time only spending in the immediate next year, and so on. And that has kept us afloat. But I think that we have something that is precarious even without the pandemic, but with the pandemic, it could really bring the house of cards tumbling down. And Sheila, Fred, and I remember what it's like for the house of cards to come tumbling down. It happens very, very quickly. We had the economic downturn in the downturn in the residential, the property value evaluations, and that exposed that we really did not have enough money in our reserves. We're not even at the legal required amount, which was a nice, nasty surprise for everybody. But that we had, and Jody, you talked about this, we may have a cash flow problem towards September this year, even with being not a doomsday budget. I would call it a gloomy budget, but not a doomsday budget. And we had to take two $10 million lines of credit just to pay our staff and to pay our vendors. So things can turn around very quickly. And the reason for these two tables in the report are to point out that we are really living beyond our means. And part of it is because of the way we budget. Part of it is because our huge reliance on grants, $6.3 million. And grants is something, the uncertainty in grants is something that we haven't talked about, but should. Right now, it looks like we're going to get a glut of money coming in. We have the $4 million transportation money that's coming in. We have the $4.2 million COVID money, and we may well be swimming in extra money going out into this year, which is in fact a cautionary statement to say maybe we shouldn't be making precipitous cuts because we really don't know what this fiscal year is going to look like. But with all of this money pouring out, and we're starting to see resistance in the Senate to be pouring out aid money, with the big tax cut, and now this big gush of money coming out of the federal government, it's hard to believe that's not going to have an impact on availability for burn grants and Pell grants and all the other grants, that $600+ million of grants that we've been routinely getting that we may now not get on top of the impacts from COVID. So the point of these two tables, Table A and Table B, was cautionary to say we're really, in my view, on thin ice, skating into this without a pandemic, and that we really need to look at that. So I don't know, Rob, if that speaks to what you wanted me to say, but that is what these tables are for.
Ross, and I think something else, just before I yield my time, I guess, would be that if you look at the number, total of the numbers, the deficit in FY20 is about, what, 5 million? And if you look at FY21 proposed, it goes up to, what, about 6.5 million? So that deficit's increasing. And that, again, is based on assumptions that are, I think, need to be updated. And so the question comes back to how are we going to even balance that out next year? And I think by calling for the reasonable freeze on salaries, and by maybe even looking at furloughs, we can go ahead and avoid layoffs. I mean, again, I went through those layoffs. I was a city employee at the time and saw my coworkers lose their jobs. I want to avoid that and for next year. And so, but if we don't do any kind of tight belting in this year, we're going to be in a tough, dire straits. And I hope that the unions will see the wisdom behind that.
We can let Jody answer, then Alderman Gay and Alderman Tierney. I can see, I'm sorry, I can't see you all.
I just want to comment on the idea that the revenue estimates are not reasonable. When we, based on what we know now, I still stand by the estimates that we have in next year's budget. And if there is, remember you talked about parking revenues as an example. And if there is another slowdown in the fall, remember right now we're opening up. And so I predicted nothing in the summer when it looks like we're probably going to have some parking revenues in the summer, more than what I predicted. So if there is a slowdown again in the fall, that could possibly cushion that. And so what we're saying, what the city manager Gerald and I are saying is that it's with what we know now, I feel that these revenue estimates are as close as we're going to get from not knowing how this is going to impact overall. And by reviewing it on a bi-monthly basis and taking a really hard look at where are we at, what do we know now, is something else happening that we should adjust these numbers down, we can adjust as we go because we just don't know what's going to happen. And you don't want to plan for furloughs and layoffs if we don't know what's going to happen.
So Alderman Gay was next, then Alderman Tierney. Full screen, please, Julian.
Yeah, I had two quick questions for Jody. The first was if you'd be able to explain on page 8, underneath of the bad news, pension costs increasing significantly, police and fire by 27, and then state pensions by 8. Could you explain that? I may have missed that in the original presentation.
Yes. So we did an we had an actuarial study of our assumptions done. It was completed in the fall, and we got our final report right before this budget process. And what it told us was that for decades, we had been using the wrong assumptions in our actuarial calculations for police and fire pension. Once we implemented a good set of those changes, we now, instead of contributing 22% of police and fire salaries to the pension, we now are doing 28% of the police and fire salaries.
So by revising it, will that going forward allow us some flexibility there, or?
So you see the jump from 22 to 28, there will be another increase next year because the actuary is suggesting that we go to a number that's 32 or 33% of salary. So there will be another increase, but these increases may not increase every year that way, meaning once we get to 33, it may stay at 33 for a very long time. You're seeing a larger increase from 20 to 21 because of that jump in the contribution of police and fire pension. In addition, the state has increased their pension contribution requirement from I think it's a 10% number to an 11% number. So they're increasing as well.
And that was in the presentation that we had when they were showing us the chart of the where we were trying to stay in between, I think, the 11 and 12%. Or
no, that's debt service.
Okay.
Of the debt service and the debt capacity. But we talked about this in the finance committee meetings about the actuarial study, and this 27% that's in city's presentation today is jumping from 22% to 28%, is about a 27% increase in the contribution. 6 percentage points higher.
And are we at some point going, and this is just general for the mayor actually, before we log off at some point, are we going to discuss, I think we had a breakdown of the COVID relief funding, correct?
The CARES money?
Yeah.
That has not been finalized. So that is in the hands of the county, and that is something that they don't really want us to discuss now. So we are kind of waiting on them.
Okay. I guess, so I mean, if we have to spend the funding by December and we haven't received it yet, I guess my question is, where will we stand if additional funding is needed, or with the timing? Like, how does that work?
I think it's pretty similar here from them. So it's not like it's within days. That's all. They just don't want it to be public now, or us to be too public about it, or us to take it for granted. David Gerald can talk about it.
Yeah, I would just say that, so the CARES is directed at expenses. So if we have COVID-related expenses in the city, we can pay for those, but it's not meant to be to make up for revenue shortfalls. So I think we'll have some opportunities to cover the costs, such as potentially.
So have we gotten like a legitimate breakdown again of like what the exact definition is? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. So I sent that out last week to all the council members, along with the draft list that we provide to the county a couple weeks ago, because we would like your input on items that may fit into that. But it has to be COVID related. It's pretty specific guidance of what that can be used for, but it's more on to cover the expenses more so than making up revenue. Jody, anything to add to that?
No. For right now, and if we have an agreement with the county, remember, they might allow us expenses that we've already incurred. So it might go back to a previous date. So we're not settled with that agreement right now, and we don't have anything certain. So I wouldn't want to go into, can't really talk about details right now.
So I guess my last question then is, so it is coming before the council so that we can have some final input, we just don't know when. I mean, it could be, I guess sometime before June is out, I'm assuming.
When we get this funding, if we get it, we have to come to the council for an appropriation to spend it. So yes, you will be hearing from us as far as the use of that money.
Thanks.
Alderman Gay? Alderman Pindell-Charles?
I think Alderwoman Tierney was next.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Rhonda. Still in my helicopter view. And let me preface this by saying, I think I've been to a lot of finance committee meetings. So I'll still ask this because I've gotten a different answer from different people. And it's pretty basic. Just for the thought of this budget, if you go to page 29 of the budget, I would like Jody to explain the judgment or thought process in the different definitions, because this is a clear misunderstanding, I think. And that would be, you have the fiscal year 2020 original budget. We know that. Then you have the adjusted budget. And I assume that's because I don't know, you can tell me, but transfers or whatever, right? I mean, that's all the stuff that happens during the year. So you have an adjusted budget at the end of this.
Grants and contributions and things that we didn't getting.
All the supplementary, all the things we approved, right? And then you go to projected, which is, tell me how you get that.
So we took a look at all departments in the general fund and all of the other funds and did a detailed projection of where we think they're going to end up in 2020. Now, if you wanted, we'd have to look at separate funds. For instance, there's about a $2 million savings in the general fund, but the rest of that savings from 146 million to 135 is in these other funds, and we could go down the list and see. Some of them are in the grants fund, so we don't always move forward with the grants as fast as we are anticipating, but we want to appropriate all that money just in case they can use it. And then you can go down all these funds and take a look and see which ones are underspending their budget to get to that difference.
Yeah, I mean, to my colleagues, this is helpful when I get questions from my constituents on where are the increases and how did we get, because they look at this and they see, okay, well, we have a proposed, let's go to the total expenditures. We have a proposed of $147 million. Well, we only project 135 million. So how did it go from 135 to 147? You know what I mean? That's really hard to explain. And but there is an explanation. But it's just, I'm just trying to see if there's any other way we can report that. You know, it's almost like saying, well, we really project it's going to be 135 million, but we're proposing 147. Do you know what I'm saying?
Use some non-accounting methods.
Yeah, I mean, this is like big picture stuff, but it sticks out like a sore thumb to my, my eye out there. my
So if I could interject, Ellie, that's what I meant. There's a better word for it. Maybe it's ultra conservative budgeting, but when you look,
is that what you were referring to?
Yeah,
that's what
right. So we were really thinking we were going to spend a lot more in 2020. We actually, I think, due to good management on the part of our department heads and our staff, we almost every year come in much lower. And when you look at the CAFR, there's a set of tables back in the 80s or 90 pages of the CAFR where they show the whole history of budgeted versus actual. And very, very rare occasions, usually in tough times like when we had the housing bubble burst, we're always budgeting more than we spend, which is good. I mean, I'm not complaining about that at all, but that's why you get these big looking jumps, as you see on page 29, where you go from 35 million to 135 million to 147 million. I don't think that 147 million will really happen either. But I do think that it's when you look at the growth in revenues versus the growth in spending actuals that you see that revenues are not increasing at the same rate as our spending is. And I think that's a lot to do with our competition. We're in competition with the county for public safety people, and we're doing that spiral. And then for the city, everybody else, the AFSCME as most favored nation status, so whatever the public safety gets, they get, and then we tend to give all the other employees whatever the unions are getting. So everybody's being pulled up by that public safety spiral. I think, frankly, Gavin, you need to have a conversation with the county executive and the surrounding jurisdictions and say, it's just like when in COVID, where states are competing with each other for PPE or tests, we're competing against ourselves and driving the price up artificially because we all want to fill all those public safety slots, which of course is a goal that our constituents demand of us. Not like we have a lot of choice, but we really are creating an artificial environment that is inflating prices of things and pulling everybody else up with it.
It's been tough to fill those positions. I'm just going to put Jody on. We're 2.5 hours in now, and so we could keep talking. So Jody, quick clarification. Put your hands up for some quick comments, please. Alderman Pindell has got a hand up. Jody?
Okay, so when you see that increase from the 21, from the projected to the 21 proposed, that's different components, and about 5 million, just short of 5 million of that's in the general fund, and most of those increases are increases in police and fire for some of the reasons we were just talking about, not only the salary increases, but the increases in the pension contribution rates. So that's the most significant increase there to that budget. And so I just wanted to clarify what's causing that. It's different components, and when you look at the details, you can explain it. And also, remember that some of these operating budgets in the general fund have one-time expenses in them that is included in that number. Like the $900,000 we're using to buy self-contained breathing apparatuses for the fire department. That's in their budget. That's a one-time item. We won't buy those again in 22.
That's why I brought it up, because that's why I brought it up. I don't want people to think that the proposed is inflationary at all. I mean, it's a studied number. It's and maybe the actual or the projected will change. I don't know, but it's just important for the public to know that that's a studied number.
Right. And of the 86 million, a big chunk of, and you can see it on the fund balance roll forward, that of the 86 million, 82.7 is regular operational expenses. The rest of them are one-time items.
Remember, we are not a for-profit organization. We can only spend what we get in. Thank you. Alderman Kendall Charles.
Yeah, just a couple things. I want to thank the Finance Committee Chair by Alderman Arnett for doing a yeoman job and just leaving pretty much 2 items to us. I'd like to thank Mr. Gerald as well as Ms. Dickinson for all the hard work they put in. One of note that kind of resonates with me on all of the budget discussions, I find great comfort in the fact that we have decided that every, I guess it's 2 months, we will be looking at each pretty much expenditure. We'll be looking at the revenues, and we will be able to determine which direction we can go for the next month or two. And during this pandemic, nobody knows what's going to happen. We listen to the scientists, we listen to the health professionals. We're listening to maybe there being another outbreak in the fall. But I think for me personally, it's a great comfort that we're going to be looking at this pretty much at the very least every other month, possibly every month, to see which way we're going, and we can make the necessary adjustments as we go along. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to call it now.
No. Just a couple of concluding. One of the things that the Finance Committee got that the rest of the council may not have gotten, which was very helpful, is the line item detail. Jody, I don't know who all that went to, but if you really want to understand what's going on behind these tables, that line item detail helps you break out those big chunks into smaller pieces. 2, we really didn't get to go through this in as organized a way as I had hoped. First of all, I want to say thank you, Rhonda, for thanking me, but you really need to thank the Finance Committee. This was a team effort, and we really did put a lot of effort into it this year, and I hope it shows in our report. But we're willing
Touche. I listed, I said you as chair, but absolutely all the members. Thank you.
We're willing to do more. We rushed this today. I'm certainly willing to sit down one-on-one with anybody that wants to go through the PowerPoint. I think the Finance Committee would be more than happy to meet again. We had suggested at least 2 sessions with the council to offer you. There's some important things that we didn't get a chance to get into today, like the stormwater fee, which does have some, I wouldn't call them controversial, but issues that we need to talk through as a council. So we're available for further discourse, as I say, either one-on-one or in another meeting, whatever you want to have with us. So that's before we signed off, I wanted to say that.
Thank you, Alderman. A quick one, Alderman Savage, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to just thank again the committee, all the committee members, but also I'd love to work with you over the next few months, but I think we need to get on people's radar is we need to figure out a plan to address this structural deficit. Regardless of what happens with COVID, it's going to be there. And that really summarized it for me, but we need to figure out a solution. I haven't heard one yet.
Okay.
One last quick thing. Katie sent out another thing, speaking to getting these updates from the administration. The third quarter update, I want to thank her for that and thank Jody, of course. But look at that, council members, because that's how we get our ongoing benchmarks, is looking at those quarterly updates. It's quite detailed and I think very informative. Should be largely reassuring because almost every department, except the city manager's department, and the finance department, are under budget for the going through the first 3 quarters. So those are kinds of tools for us to help us have an up-to-date feeling about what's going on.
My department is way under budget, and if you're talking about finance not allocated, it's because we haven't finished the bond entries from December. That'll fix that situation. My department is way under budget.
Thank you, everybody. Mr. City Attorney, the next item on the agenda.
That ends the agenda for today, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sure there's nothing else for good order. Alderman Peone?
I move that we adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Cabinet.
No.